how do you change people's behavior? How do you get them to do things or to prevent them from doing other things? I've always been incredibly fascinated with this question, both as a psychologist as well as an advertising guy. Now, today I want to convince you of 3 things. Basically, the first thing is that advertising people really do a bad job in trying to influence or change people's behavior. Second thing I want to do is I want to warn you for design people, for they are the true masters of manipulation. And third thing I want to do is once we start to learn and to realize how design people shape our behavior, I think that we can do really, really interesting things with it. I think that we can do really interesting things with it in order to basically manipulate the world into a better place. Now let me begin with advertising. I run an ad agency. My job basically is to persuade people to buy products, that's the evil part of it, or persuade people to stop smoking, start running, lose weight, etc. That's, I guess, the good part of it. Now what strikes me as an advertising guy is that the tools or the instruments that we use in order to persuade people, in order to get them to change their behavior, are actually pretty lame. We are totally addicted to the idea that as long as we keep throwing communication at people, they will eventually change their behavior. Now, the fact, as you can see in this image, that advertising is rapidly becoming one of the biggest polluting forces in the world, both illustrates this addiction, I guess, as well as it illustrates its failure. We actually have reached the point that we need governments like the government in Sao Paulo to liberate us from this addiction, basically by banning advertising from the streets. Now, this brings me to my second point. I want to argue that advertising people can learn a lot from design people. I think, and I want to argue that when it comes to changing people's behavior, design people eat advertising people for breakfast. Now, I'm not talking about graphic designers. I'm also talking about industrial designers, game designers, persuasion designers. Basically, everyone who uses design as a tool, as an instrument to shape our behavior instead of communication. Now, let me illustrate this with a few examples of the power of how design shapes our behavior in totally different areas of life. And as you all probably already saw this one, I guess this is a brilliant design that basically helps men to aim to please the toilet lady. It's based on a brilliant psychological insight. Give us men something to aim at and you got us completely hooked. Now, I guess that you can understand that this kind of design solution beats every warning sign by far. This is Neil Strauss. You might have heard about him. He's known to be one of the best pickup artists in the world. And what pickup artists do is they kind of crafted an art or even a science out of seducing women. Now, what fascinates me as an ad guy about what pickup artists do is that pickup artists have this #1 rule in the book that is exactly the opposite of what advertising people do. When pickup artists want to seduce a woman, the first thing they do is they completely ignore her. They seduce her friends first, then they carefully design the stage around her in order for her to get interested in the seducer. And in the end, basically what they do, they don't seduce, they simply design her seductive or seducing behavior. They design a behavior for her to get interested in him. Now that's exactly the opposite of what advertising people do. We just seduce you straight in your face. We hit you with our most seductive promises. And somehow pickup artists understand something that advertising people don't understand. That if you want to seduce, you have to carefully design behavior. This is a fairly common image in Greece, and it's a perfect example of how legislation shapes our behavior in rather unpredictable ways. You can see this everywhere in Greece. Finished houses, at least the first floor is finished, but with an unfinished second floor on top of it. The reason for this is very simple. There's a law in Greece that says that if you don't finish your house, as long as your house is not finished, you don't pay taxes. That's what game designers call pervert triggers. And that's That's an interesting idea. You can compare it with speed cameras along the highway. These are pervert triggers too, because what they do is basically they design exactly the opposite behavior. What they communicate is, hey, this is where you get caught, but for the rest of your journey, do enjoy speeding. This is a music academy. And I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's a rapid decline in the number of kids that attend music school. Now you can look at it from an advertising and marketing perspective, and you can try to solve this with a great campaign that promotes music school. The problem with a music school is that it's not a marketing problem, it's a design problem. Game designers would call a music academy a totally broken game design. And there's several reasons for that. It's in a school building, it actually feels like school, it even smells like school, you know, the scent of piss in the hallway. You get to practice the boring stuff for basically 2 years before you get to play any good stuff, and you get tested in a very stressful way at the end of every year in order to decide whether you can go to the next level. Now, if you've ever noticed a kid playing Guitar Hero on its Xbox, then you quickly realize that there are far more interesting ways to design total addiction to learning to play music. Now, I said in the beginning of my presentation that I wanted to convince you of 3 things. The first thing was that advertisers have absolutely no idea on how to shape or influence your behavior. I've tried to convince you that designers somehow hold the secret to it, to shaping our behavior. They know that if you want to change behavior, you have to manipulate it, you have to design it, you have to shape it. Now, I want to argue a third thing, and that is that once we know this, once we realize this, that we can really use this manipulative force in order to basically shape a better world, in order to manipulate the world into a better place. Now, I want to give you 2 examples of work that we've been doing with our previous agency that actually was based on this idea. First one is for a Dutch NGO called HIVOS. And what they asked us was if we could get people in the Netherlands to spill less energy, to waste less energy. And the reason for that is that the more energy we waste here, the more famine and ecological disasters will appear in southern countries. Now, they first tried to solve the problem themselves with advertising. Basically, with this advertising, it says, he thanks you for using your dryer, for not using your dryer. Now, I think you can grasp that this ad does a really bad job in trying to persuade you to stop, wasting energy. Actually, it got exactly the opposite effect, because people got quite pissed off with this one, because they kind of felt insulted with it, because there's so much energy waste in industrial world that come on, it's me not using my dry cleaner will make the difference. It's exactly the opposite reaction to it. We did something different. We organized what we called the Subduction Project for them. And it was a series of showcases that proved on how design thinking and design could actually, basically we wanted to inspire policymakers, designers, architects into applying this design thinking into designing products or designing buildings. And this is one of the examples of the showcase of the prototypes that we developed in this project. It's called the light gun. What the light gun does is it's an infrared gun, and it's a fun way to shoot out the lights when you're at night sitting in your couch watching TV. It made a lot of great noises when you shut out the light. The cool thing with it was that once you wanted to put the lights back on again, it didn't work. You had to get out of the couch. I think it's designed around a brilliant insight, is that most energy-wasting behavior has nothing to do with bad will, but with laziness. I want to finalize with this example. This is one of my favorite cases. This is a case we've done for the Dutch government. They asked us if we could do something about counterfeit medicine. There's a big trend of people buying prescription drugs online, but without prescription. And of course, I'm talking about drugs like Viagra and sleeping pills and tranquilizers. You know, the stuff you don't really need a doctor for, but you do need a doctor to get the prescription. Now, the problem is that buying these drugs drugs is rather dangerous. Buying these fake drugs are rather dangerous. The problem with the audience is that you can't convince them of that. Because when you try to convince them, they all go, yeah, I know this, and I know how to separate a fake site from a real one, and I can get my drugs without prescription in foreign countries, and it's the Dutch government, they always want to interfere with what I do, and blah, 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 blah. They never accept any warning or argument or communication for that matter. So what we did is the following. We first asked the best persuasion designer in the Netherlands to build this fake online pharmacy. And it's stuffed with persuasion principles. I mean, the moment you're looking for Viagra, you come on this site, boy, you get seduced. Then we asked the best search engine guy in the Netherlands to make sure that this site would pop up in the search result. And indeed, after 6 weeks, whenever you were looking for any of those drugs that you want to buy online, our Medi-plaza webshop would pop up in the top 3 search results in the Netherlands. And then an interesting thing happened. The moment you came on the site, you started to click on it, this is what happened. The site disappeared, the guy came off his ladder and said, look, we can't forbid you to do it, but we now clearly illustrate how easy it is to fool you. And we've done some research afterwards in focus groups, and people went totally apeshit on this one. It scared the living shit out of them. But they actually responded really cool to it, because then they realized that they weren't capable of separating a fake supplier from a real one. So I want to end my talk with a warm plea. I know that most of the principles that I've been discussing, the design principles, can be used in a very bad way. I think they can definitely be used for bad, but they also can be used in a really good way. And I think that we can, or we should, come up with something very ambitious, some big seduction or even manipulation project, to manipulate the world into a better place. Thank you.